Whenever you're ready.
Hi guys, my name is Manav and I'm going to be talking about natural disasters and resilience as a solution. So, as many of you are probably wondering, what are natural disasters? The US government's Federal Emergency Management Agency describes natural disasters as environmental phenomenon that have the ability to affect societies and human environments. It's also important to note that they can cause significant repercussions and they are extremely frequent. For instance, the 2022 Ecological Threat Register and Emergency Events Database says that in 2019 the number of natural disasters had an increase from tenfold in 1960. These are some of the examples of natural disasters, from floods to wildfires to volcanic eruptions. Now let's move on to economic and infrastructural impacts of natural disasters. The United Nations says that the human capital is destroyed because natural disasters lead to deterioration of health, loss of life, destruction of workplace and educational institutions, and they also damage infrastructure, and they also damage natural resources since they lead to destruction of forests and they decrease soil fertility, which leads to food shortages, which is often very common in natural disasters. All of these problems are very common in the scenario of natural disasters because they lead to many different types of economic problems since industries cannot function. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says that in 2020, the United States' natural disasters led to a cost of $1 billion. The Insurance Information Institute says that the global natural disasters in 2020 led to $74.4 billion in costs. These are some of the impacts that disasters have on infrastructure, which include personal and industrial settings, transportation, utilities like water systems, as well as water systems. These are some of the examples of the damages that are done to infrastructure by natural disasters. As shown are earthquakes that happened in Italy and in India just recently. And some other examples are earthquakes in Iran and Haiti, which are shown here. Some other examples are also shown by the land erosion in Alaska, which led to many homes being washed away into the ocean, and a tsunami in Indonesia. The greatest economic impact is on poor populations because when a disaster strikes, these populations are in poverty, and this leads to them having to compromise their basic needs. In order to compensate for their basic needs, they end up having to sell their assets. However, they cannot replenish their assets, which continues a cycle of poverty traps or continuing poverty. Now let's move on to the health impacts of natural disasters. Some of the impacts are deaths and injuries, as well as the spread of diseases, because water systems and sewage systems are often destroyed, and this leads to contamination of water systems, as well as spread of waterborne diseases. And there's also a lack of nutrition due to food shortages, which can also lead to diseases. And there's a lot of carcinogens that get passed around, such as radiation, which can lead to cancer. The Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters says in the last 25 years, about 7,000 natural disasters occurred and they killed about 1.35 million people. This is important because it shows that natural disasters have a huge death toll. Health repercussions are the most impactful on patients with chronic diseases, and this is because they require constant medical care. However, during times of natural disasters, they lead to the destruction of healthcare facilities as well as medicine and equipment, which leads to care not being able to be provided, and this leads to these diseases being worsened, and this increases the death toll. Conclusion. The best option to deal with natural disasters is resilience, and this because, as Encyclopedia Britannica says, natural disasters have underlying environmental causes that cannot be conquered because they're environmental causes and they're out of control of humans. And so the best option is resilience, because although we cannot eliminate natural disasters because of the cause being unconquerable, we can reduce the repercussions that are caused by natural disasters. Rahil et al., which are social worker professors at Johns Hopkins University, says that resilience is the ability of a population to return to a previous or healthy state of functioning before a natural disaster or any unprecedented event. Community resilience requires a partnership of public, government, and professionals, and this is because They all need to function together in order to reduce the repercussions or impacts caused by natural disasters. Community resilience often focuses on environmental, health, and economic aspects because those are usually the main areas that are impacted by natural disasters. So community resilience, as shown by Dr. Paracha and Chaudhry, which are professors of sustainable development at the University of Kuwait and West Sydney, show that there's 4 stages, which include the response stage, or providing emergency relief, recovery stage, which provides restoration of goods and services that are lost, prevention phase, which is implementing precautionary measures in order to decrease the risk of natural disasters occurring, and the preparedness phase, which is basically preparing a population to respond to a natural disaster to limit the repercussions. First solution is the infrastructure. So in the recovery phase, as mentioned earlier, the infrastructure that was lost can be compensated by rebuilding new infrastructure immediately. Preparedness phase, the damage-proof materials can be used to build stronger buildings so that these buildings do not face as bad of consequences as those that are made with weaker materials. And some strong and damage-proof materials include steel-proof and steel-enforced concrete, pressure-treated lumber, as well as rubber. The limitations are that this solution is time-consuming, it requires manpower, resources, research, and funding, and it's potentially ineffective because we don't really know exactly what materials are the best in what conditions. However, the implications are it increases preparedness and it leads to fewer repercussions because it protects health as well as economic phenomenon by making sure that these institutions do not face a lot of damages, which can allow for these institutions and industries to function. Second solution is the food supply. And in the preparedness phase, the government can educate farmers regarding how to grow flood-resistant crops, which can be cultivated in order to provide the nation with food self-sufficiency. And this is important because a lack of food self-sufficiency leads to food shortages, which is common in natural disasters. This was exemplified by the UK government, and this was shown to be very beneficial and effective in reducing food shortages. The limitations are that it's time-consuming and requires skills, manpower, research, and funding, versus the implications are that it leads to self-sufficiency and ensures nourishment, which promotes health, and you can also export these goods, which leads to economic benefits, and it eliminates poverty traps. So this shows that this solution doesn't only counter the infrastructure and food shortage problems alone, but also promotes health and economic aspects. Third solution is preserving life and well-being. So we can use the preparedness phase to improve infrastructure and to train healthcare providers and health organizations and to arrange equipment and educate the public on how they should react or act in response to a natural disaster. And you can also synthesize safety plans, which include determining where shelter can be found, evacuation routes, and emergency plans. This is also exemplified by the UK government, and it was shown to be effective. And you can also implement emergency alert systems, such as by the United States, which allows officials to send out messages to the public regarding forthcoming natural disasters, which allows them to prepare better and better respond to these natural disasters. Limitations are that it's time-consuming and requires research and funding, and it could be potentially ineffective if the alerts aren't issued on time or if they're incorrect. Implications, however, are that this leads to awareness and enhanced preparedness, and this can lead to better responses because people are more prepared for what to do in these situations, which allows them to better prepare and to be ready for these situations, which reduces the repercussions. And this is more exciting.
Okay. All right, so we have 2 questions for you. How did your research question evolve as you moved through the research process? Did your research go in a different direction than originally planned?
So originally I started with the idea of only focusing on the health impacts because as most of us think, or what most of us think about when we think about natural disasters are the death toll and injuries because those are often the most common types of repercussions that people are most aware about. However, I realized that I shouldn't only focus on this, I should also focus on other lenses like the economic and infrastructural lenses because those are also connected to the health lens. For instance, it was mentioned that destruction of water systems and sewage systems lead to diseases such as waterborne diseases, as well as contamination, which can lead to many chronic and other contagious diseases. And for instance, other impacts are due to economic restrictions, populations cannot provide enough food for themselves, which leads to poor nourishment, and this also leads to natural disasters.
Okay. And then lastly, what advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
For other researchers, I would definitely say to focus on a variety of lenses, like I said earlier, because focusing on one lens, although it provides a narrow focus on the problem itself, it's more important to focus on different aspects because it shows how far-stretched the impacts of natural disasters are. Because just like I said earlier, health impacts, it's not only caused by health impacts themselves, like diseases, deaths, injuries, but also by other impacts such as economic restrictions and infrastructure losses. Like if a building collapses due to being made of weak materials, many people can be caught under the debris, which can also increase death. So that's an important thing. And also, this is important because it shows that natural disasters are really important or really detrimental because just because one direct effect occurs due to natural disasters, other side or indirect effects also occur, and this leads to many widespread effects of natural disasters, which can impact not only the population itself, but also populations around them and the economies around them.
All right. Thank you very much.